And a big thank you to those sponsors. Make sure to check out their booths at the expo. Now, next up on track 2, we have a talk from Paul McBride, the personable tech educator, developer, and general tech enthusiast that many of us know. He will be talking about the history and use of state machines and introducing state charts into JavaScript. On track 1, we have the well-known Emma Mulholland of Install, known for also her accomplishments outside, such as co-founding Product Camp Belfast, Product Tank Belfast, and Lean Coffee Belfast. That's quite a lot. She'll be talking about empathy as a superpower, and we'll hear about empathy, what it is, and why it is important when you're building products. Over to you, Emma.
Instill, I think everyone knows, has been around for the last 15 years as a local software company and works with many cool clients. The exciting thing that's happening in Instill at the moment is that Instill is actually moving towards product creation as opposed to just software creation. So we've now got designers and product people. So it's an exciting time at Instill at the moment. Okay, cool. So what exactly is empathy? The word gets thrown around a fair bit, and people seem to understand what it is. However, it's sometimes misunderstood. I want to explain it, putting it in place against sympathy, because they often get mixed up. So actually, firstly, empathy is sometimes kind of presented as this superpower, this alien thing, this other thing that doesn't really apply to us. And that's a bit of a disservice that sci fantasy has done. So you've got like Mantis and Guardians of the Galaxy, or even Spock. But actually, empathy is an innately human trait. And in this talk, I want to explain that it's also a skill that you can learn. Okay, so the definition. It's the ability to share someone else's feelings or experiences by imagining what it would be like to be in that situation. And it's the imagination part that's critical, and that I'll come back to later. And this kind of contrasts with sympathy, which drives disconnection. So it's less about being on a par with someone and sharing that experience, and more about kind of almost looking down on someone with almost like a patronizing feeling. Empathy drives connection, whereas sympathy actually drives disconnection. So a nice way to think about empathy is that basically you've fallen into this hole, and it's dark, and you're stuck, and you're overwhelmed, and someone comes along and they look down into the hole, and they're saying, oh man, that's a sticky situation, that's not great. And then someone else comes along and they climb down into the hole with you, and they say, I've been here, I know what this is like, and they stay there with you. It's a really nice thing, and it's a connecting thing. This actually exact example was used in The West Wing. I don't know how many of you are West Wing fans, but it's part of the storyline. Josh Lyman was shot, and then he suffered from PTSD. And there was like a critical episode where that was explored, and he became really scared that he'd lose his job. And he was told by Leo, who was chief of staff, I know what this is like, and I've had my troubles, and as long as I have a job, you have a job. It's kind of that I got you feeling. Okay, so what are the elements of empathy? So the example I was talking about earlier, that was in a video by Brené Brown, and she calls out these 4 elements of empathy. So one is perspective taking, staying out of judgment, and that's a difficult thing to do as humans because we innately judge people. Recognizing emotion, and then communication, the recognition of that emotion. So why is it important? It's important for many, many reasons, but especially for us as software developers and product people and in the creation of technology products. That's actually easy to do. And I know it's a little bit flippant because I do understand it's difficult and developers are very skilled, but actually you can create technology and software fairly easily, and it's the people bit that's hard. People as in working with people, but also in the creation of usable, desirable, delightful products. Kind of empathy and that usability factor is the differentiator in technology nowadays, and that can be quite difficult to get. Not only that, but it's also an essential skill for the future of work. There are a number of studies that have called this out, that in the future, as things become automated, emotional intelligence and skills like empathy will become critical for the workforce. So this is a McKinsey study that shows how that difference is going to happen, but also the OECD has called it out as a key skill for children, so they're trying to get into the curriculum as a key skill for 2030. Okay, and how do we use it to build better products? I'm going to go through this section quite quickly because this could be a talk or multiple talks in their own right, but that's not what I want to focus on. But it's just to highlight how we use it in creating products. So always, everywhere, everyone, empathy is used at every stage of the product development process and in every role. So I'm not saying this as a product person needs to be empathetic and designers need to be empathetic. Everyone needs to be empathetic in order to make awesome products. But specific areas that empathy is used is within your immediate team, within stakeholders in the kind of the wider project, and to talk to your end users and fully understand them when you're building for them. So here's some tools that you can use to improve your team dynamics. Firstly, understand yourself as an individual and then understand each other as individuals. I will hit on that later on in the talk. Secondly, have really good feedback loops. So this is tools such as retros, or just give each other individual feedback in the moment. You can create the team canvas. That's what I've got up here at the moment. So that allows the team to discuss their values and how they want to work. And it's a living document, so you can return to that and just keep everyone aligned. And all of these different elements then create psychological safety. And then with stakeholders, you see all the time, and it starts to drive me a bit mad, this concept of stakeholder management. You know, as if they're this outside thing you've got to control, but actually I prefer the concept of stakeholder engagement. And this is where you use your empathy to understand your stakeholders as humans individually, and then to start to bring all your stakeholders together to align them to your common purpose. So this diagram is shuttle diplomacy, which is a tool to kind of engage stakeholders. And finally, users. And this is the core part of a product manager's job and a designer's job. It's this whole concept of fully understanding your user's world and making sure you're building to meet their needs and goals and to solve their problems. The thing that I'd say at this point is user research. It's not just the quantitative side or even the sort of surveys and getting that user feedback. To be truly empathetic and to actually get it, I'd highly recommend immersive user research. So this is where you go to your user and you actually fully immerse yourself in their world. So you're understanding not just how they're using your product, but everything around it, their environment and all the other things they're using and all the other things that are going on in that situation. And that will make sure that you truly understand and truly empathize with them. Okay, cool. So kind of covered what is empathy and why is it important and, you know, all of that. How do you actually start to improve your own empathy skills? So the first thing, and the thing that we're going to talk most about, is know yourself. This sounds like a pretty strange thing to say, but actually very few people are self-aware. Before you can start to imagine other people's worlds, as we understood the definition, you actually need to fully understand your world. You need to understand who you are, why you think the way you think, because all humans are completely different. We all have an individual view of reality because there isn't one objective view of reality. This model is called Steps of Inference, and it shows how you actually end up with your thoughts and your behaviors. And it also shows how that they actually amplify themselves. So as you start to create this version of your world, you actually amplify it, and it kind of becomes more and more embedded. And the thing about this is, the critical thing that you've got to understand is that as human beings, we have all these shortcuts in our brains to help us understand the world as quickly as possible. So these first steps where you observe and select data that you're going to start to interpret, we've shortcutted that with things like stereotypes and biases and all these patterns and heuristics, and they're going to be subjective and they're going to have biases, and you need to start to understand those because you need to be able to decouple those so that you can start to put yourself in other people's positions. And the scary thing is that we find it hard to understand ourselves, why we think the way we do, but the outside world is actually controlling this so much more than it ever did. I mean, every time we interact with technology and screens, it's not the same thing that every other human is saying, because all these companies and all these very how little control we have over our own reality anymore. I mean, we're all in this, the quote they use is, we are all inside our own Truman shows. So even before we had technology, the process of understanding ourselves was hard. It's so much harder now, and we have to make like an active effort to try and break that and understand ourselves more. Okay, so how do we become self-aware? The first thing I'd say, and actually I should probably put this afterwards after I've kind of told you the tools, but actually becoming self-aware is going to be difficult, and it's going to be really painful because obviously we all think that our view of reality is it's good and real and, you know, and all the rest of that, and starting to understand like how people perceive us and starting to like understand our behaviors and try and change them is really very difficult, but it is so worth it. Okay, so tools and techniques to become self-aware. The way I like to think about this is, if we're all like viewing the world through this lens, this is how you start to clean that lens. Hence my little Lego man. Okay, and the first thing you do, and this actually gets used in sort of counselling and therapy for a bit as well, is to create your own timeline. This might sound like a strange thing, but every single person is basically the output or the outcome of their life experiences, their culture, all the interactions they've ever had, good and bad. And if you actually spend some time to step back and map all of that out, you'll start to understand why you react in certain ways. And sometimes things that are happening in your world today, or how you're reacting, is actually the result of something you've experienced in the past. And sometimes we overreact and we get angry, and it's actually all linked to other events. So this is why I put the Marvel timeline up, because essentially it's a whole myriad of different characters and different timelines and different loops, and that's kind of almost like a human being. I mean, we have a chronological timeline, but its impact and how everything happens can be out of time as well. Okay, so other things that you can do to become self-aware. Start to notice how you react to things. As painful as it might be, things that really piss us off and really frustrate us, especially in other people, are often things that we do ourselves. And so we have this mirroring effect, and actually taking the time to reflect on that and understand what's frustrating us, that probably leads us to understand ourselves more. Get feedback, and I don't mean this in kind of a platitude work way, you know, I'm great and need a promotion. Get 360 honest feedback from people in your personal life as well as your work life, and listen to it honestly and reflect on it, because this will also most probably be quite different from what you're expecting, and that's a good thing because it will help you understand yourself. And this is an ongoing thing as well, because you will start to change and you will get more feedback, and it's an ongoing process. All of this is an ongoing lifetime process. Journaling. This isn't something that just, you know, teenagers do, like writing in their diary in the evening. This is actually something that's useful for all humans, and we should be doing it on a regular basis, giving ourselves the headspace to kind of critically reflect on ourselves. And then mindfulness is a really helpful tool. I personally have got really into meditation since lockdown, and Headspace has been a complete game changer for me. But mindfulness in general is separate from meditation, which is one form of it. But essentially mindfulness lets you start to understand a situation and feel everything associated to it, and kind of just stop reacting and pushing emotions away, if that makes sense. Because what you need to start to do to empathize and to understand yourself is to start to just let yourself experience these emotions, and then start to understand what other people are feeling as well. Quite often we don't even know what we feel, and we either push it away, or we react too quickly, or we externalize things, and just allowing yourself to do that is really powerful, and again also quite difficult. And then finally, once you've kind of started to understand yourself, you can create a user manual to share with others. And this is one of the steps that I would recommend to do as a team, is to start to kind of compare and contrast how all of you operate as humans. So this particular one was created by Stephen Limmer, who is a local agile coach. I do know that other companies do similar things. Atlassian has a playbook of lots of tools and frameworks, and one of theirs is a user manual as well. Okay, so that's self-awareness, which is the first step to becoming empathetic. But then what else can you start to do? So read from a diverse range of source material and diversify your social media and your social circles. This is linking back to that whole concept of our world is controlled by algorithms. And yes, it might be nice to think that we, have the one right view of the world, but that's not actually true. And yes, it can be upsetting and frustrating to follow people on Twitter or other social media platforms that you disagree with. But the truth of the matter is that the world is made up of lots of different humans, and if you close yourself off from lots of different views, then you are removing the ability to be empathetic. And I'm going to keep going because we're losing time. Okay, then there's this empathy model. This was created by Helen Rees, who is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. She has done a lot of research into doctors and psychiatrists and their patients, and she, from a neurobiological and point of view, and she found that this model actually created better outcomes because you can actually measure and track empathy. And that's what she was doing. So, takeaways. Empathy is a critical skill, but you can learn it. Self-awareness is the key. Yes, it is difficult, but what I would say is be kind to yourself throughout this process, because it will be difficult, and then be kind to others. And that's me. So thank you very much.
And a big thank you to Emma for that thought-provoking and informative talk. Now, it provoked quite a few thoughts, so we have quite a lot of questions from the audience here.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Really? That's worrying. I wasn't sure if I should be nervous if I didn't get questions, or nervous if I did get questions.
Well,
Okay.
Now we know the answer. So at the very start, you were talking about the empathy being innate human nature and also a learned skill. Mm-hmm. Which path did you find yourself on?
Both. I am innately a very empathetic person. So, do you know if you walk through an office and you walk past people and you can immediately tell how they're feeling, or you start to feel it? That's something I've always had. But it's something that I've also been working on, and specifically the last couple of years have actually been quite difficult at different times. And the reason that I had to learn to become more empathetic, to understand people, to understand situations, to start to make them better. So it's a bit of both.
Did you find there was maybe one tip that you thought worked really well for you to improve your empathy?
Oh, man. I think, we used tools in a situation before that basically you start to walk through with someone, like, this is what I need, and what do you need, and what do you value? Do you know what I mean? So actually having open and honest conversations with people about their needs. It's almost like that user manual, that actually is a real critical game changer, because how we perceive the world and how we want to be communicated to or loved or many other things is very different to how other people want to be. So you need to understand that as a starting point.
It's really hard to read and ask at the same time. Please bear with me.
That's great.
So you're working on your empathy, you're trying to get more people to realize its importance. Have you ever met people that think they're empathetic but aren't really?
Yes, sometimes. And sometimes I'm sure I've even done it, where you think you're empathetic or you want to be empathetic, but it can be really difficult to be empathetic when you disagree with people, or be empathetic when you don't agree with the course of action that's happening. So that can be difficult.
In a lot of the things that the people before in human nature, there's a bias. Is there a way to find out about a bias that people have without just outright asking them?
How can you find out if someone has a certain bias? I don't know, because it would depend what the bias is, I would say. So, for example, people have biases about how they want to absorb information which sounds strange, but some people are visual communicators, whereas some people like lots of detail and words, and some people don't mind being told information in the moment and being able to respond to it, and some people actually are reflective thinkers and need. So I mean, a way you can find things out like that is just experiment, which is actually a bit like product in general, is that you kind of start with an assumption or a baseline and experiment to work out if it's valid or not. Which almost sounds like you're testing people. That almost sounds wrong in its own right. But yeah, I guess you could experiment.
Is there something you would recommend people reading to learn a little bit more about this?
The Helen Rees is actually really good around all the empathetic models. Yeah.
Helen Rees, and quite a few people enjoyed your materials today. Do you share your slides and the likes of the template that you had on the Team Canvas slide?
Yes, I can make those available.
With Twitter or something like
that? Yeah, I can tweet that out.
There you go, on Twitter. And there is one last question that is, I think, rhetorical. This was awesome.
What?
The question is, this was awesome.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma.
Okay, cool. Thank you.